When we talk about the richest people in history, we're sure you might think Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk are at the top of the list. But that's wrong. When we adjust for inflation, there's been loads of people that are much richer than our 21st century billionaires. In today's video, we'll be going over a brief list of the wealthiest people of all time. So let's dive in. First off, at number 10 on the list is Cornelius Vanderbilt, $239 billion. Cornelius Vanderbilt was also known as the Commodore because he owned a shipping fleet. This helped him accumulate the majority of his wealth. He was a successful businessman and generous person. His net worth is currently thought to be approximately $239 billion. Vanderbilt later expanded into railways as well. He worked beside Rockefeller, and much of their oil was transported using Vanderbilt's railways. Next up on number 9 is Croesus, $325 billion. He's the legendary Lydian monarch. Croesus was the first ruler to introduce gold coins as the standard form of payment. As a result, his degree of personal wealth also expanded dramatically. Although the gold coins weren't released for his own gain, they significantly improved trade efficiency inside the realm. This resulted in higher taxes, which eventually raised the king's revenue. Quite a smart move. Number 8 on the list is Joseph Stalin, $359 billion. Although it's hard to distinguish between the dictator's personal fortune and that of the USSR, his unique position allowed him access to an unfathomable amount of wealth and power. Stalin oversaw one of the biggest economies and superpowers in the world. He's a deserving candidate for our list of very wealthy people for this reason. Without restrictions, Stalin maintained total authority over a sixth of the planet. His economic power has been unparalleled in recent history. As a result, the Soviet Union's riches were under Stalin's control. His personal wealth is currently valued at roughly $359 billion. Moving on to number 7, Andrew Carnegie, $400 billion. This is yet another beneficiary of the Industrial Revolution. At the time, he faced out against people like Rockefeller and JP Morgan. Andrew was from the United States and made a huge amount of wealth during this time. This Scottish immigrant sold his business, U.S. Steel, to JP Morgan in 1896 for a staggering $480 million. Some academics contend that he may be the richest American to have ever lived. That amounted to 2.1% of the US GDP at the time. According to today's rates, Carnegie would be worth a staggering $400 billion. Next up on number 6 is Alan Rufus, $533 billion. Alan Rufus, often known as Alan the Red, was the nephew of William the Conqueror. He too accumulated incredible fortune, leaving it in his wake. Being his uncle's ally in the Norman conquest paid off for Alan Rufus, since he was able to purchase around 250,000 acres of land. He lived between 1040 and 1093. Rufus was valued at 11,000 British pounds at the time of his death. This amounts to 7% of the nation's GDP, according to experts. Following up on number 5 is John D. Rockefeller, $674 billion. A new and distinctive class of wealthy people emerged as a result of the Industrial Revolution. One of these persons was John Rockefeller. He lived between 1839 and 1937. Rockefeller was an American citizen, and during the course of his life, he accumulated a wealth of $674 billion. He benefited financially from oil and started making investments in the standard Standard Oil Company as early as 1863. By 1880, Standard Oil dominated 90% of the oil industry in the United States. The fourth person on the list is the famous Genghis Khan, $2.1 trillion. Temujin was Genghis Khan's original name. Khan's name translates to universal ruler. After Alexander the Great, he established and governed one of the largest empires. He lived between 1162 and 1227. The huge regions that Genghis Khan conquered are what gave him his fortune. He's renowned for leading the Mongolian Empire's military with excellence. His generosity was another factor in his success. Everyone, from foot troops to generals, profited from his victories. Given that he didn't construct any palaces, temples, or even a tomb for himself, it's challenging to determine his riches. However, experts estimate that he's worth about $2.1 trillion now. Moving on, the third person on the list is King Akbar, $3.8 trillion. He's the legendary Shah Jahan's son, the emperor who ordered the Taj Mahal, one of the world's 7 wonders of architecture, to be built. He lived between 1542 and 1605 and reigned over India during the infamous Mughal Empire. 1/4 of the world's GDP was the responsibility of the empire. Some European explorers thought the emperor's lifestyle was incredibly luxurious. Akbar was superior to European kings in that respect. Economist Milanovic Blanco supports the claim that Indian nobles were wealthier than their European counterparts. His report demonstrates how well run the Mughal Empire was. The government was very good at taking money from the people. This clarified the enormous riches of the emperor. The estimated value of Akbar's personal wealth now is $3.8 trillion. Following up on number 2 is Emperor Shenzong, $4 trillion. The enormous Chinese empire was ruled by Shenzong. He was in power from 1048 to 1085. His dominion made up between 25 to 30% of the global GDP. Economically, the Song dynasty, which governed China from 960 to 1279, was one of the most prosperous. The emperor's riches came from taxation and scientific advancements. According to historians, China achieved technical advances during this time that were centuries ahead of those accomplished by European powers. The fact that the government was centralized is another factor contributing to these enormous riches. This implied that the emperor had enormous financial influence. His wealth is currently estimated to be around $4 trillion. Number 1 on the list is Mansa Musa, $4.6 trillion. Mansa Musa, the king of Mali, was reputed to be more wealthy than anybody could have imagined. The consensus among economists and historians now is that Mansa Musa is the richest person the world has ever known. Mansa Musa was king from 1280 until 1337. His wealth and luxury had no boundaries. Mansa Musa's kingdom was most likely the leading gold producer during the period of his rule. Gold was in great demand during this period. At times, His Majesty's riches are depicted in ways that are unfathomable. One of the most incredible tales ever told regarding the level of his wealth involves his well-known journey to Mecca, when he carried pounds of gold with him and distributed it among the people during his journey. Mansa Musa has a reputation for being a big spender. He spent so much money when he was there that the kingdom experienced a monetary crisis. Unfortunately, it's impossible to estimate his wealth with any degree of accuracy. Records that may aid in this endeavor are either few or non-existent. It goes without saying that you are dangerously wealthy if experts can't even begin to understand how wealthy you are. In other news, first off, India's richest person overtakes Bezos on the list of billionaires. 3 different individuals changed places as the number 2 slot in the top 10 richest people in the world during the course of one day on Friday, underscoring the market turbulence opulence and the spectacular ascension of Indian billionaire Gautam Adani on a list previously dominated by tech titans. On Forbes' real-time billionaire rankings on Friday morning, Adani edged over French business tycoon Bernard Arnault and knocked Amazon founder Jeff Bezos down to number 4. Adani dropped to number 3, ahead of Bezos by the afternoon, continuing the upheaval. Coal mining, data centers, airports, and renewable energy are all included in Adani's portfolio of businesses and interests as the chairman of the Adani Group, a global conglomerate. And in the past year, his fortune has increased dramatically, coinciding with the decline in the value of many of Wall Street's greatest names and the top American IT businesses. Next up, the reason family offices use women to oversee billions of dollars. Even though males make up over 90% of the world's billionaires, it appears that when it comes to managing their wealth, they turn exclusively to the women who work in hedge funds, investment banks, and other financial institutions. Finding out why this is the case is challenging, but in general, many attribute it, among other things, to a longer-term mindset that might be hard to find in the competitive, fast return on investment techniques that are common on Wall Street. Wendy Kraft, who manages the family office of real estate heir Kent Swig, said that a lot of males do fantastic work, but there is a tiny section who aren't as collaborative and don't get along too well with families, whereas a lot of women are able to negotiate the family office issues. Lastly, wartime Russia is not an easy ride for Moscow's rich in flashy cars. A group of affluent Russians who drove pricey supercars around Moscow immediately ran afoul of the law, much like many other people who have organized parties in public under President Vladimir Putin's Russia. According to state-run TASS, 7 individuals, including Alexander Donskoy, a former mayor of Arkhangelsk, were sentenced to up to 15 days in jail for taking part in a mass assembly of residents in a public location. According to a representative at Moscow's Tagansky court, another 19 people will soon have similar hearings, the news service reports. That's a wrap for this video. What do you think about the richest people in history? Make sure to comment below. Give a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more videos like this. See you in the next one.